Chapter 6, Multicellular Organisms. What's the big idea? Multicellular organisms have similarities to single-cell organisms. They can be sorted into groups. Essential questions. Lesson 1. How are living things grouped? Science in Georgia. Dawsonville. Dear Grayson, did you know there are more kangaroos in Georgia than anywhere else? Well, except Australia, of course. Today, my class went to see them at the Kangaroo Conservation Center. They also have Australian birds called kookaburras. The animals here are so different from animals near my house. Your friend, Chelsea. Chelsea noticed how different animals from Australia look compared to animals from North America. What does this have to do with the big idea? Lesson 1. Essential question. How are living things grouped? Georgia Fast Fact. Incoming. This little brown bat may look ferocious, but the average adult only weighs 8 grams. The little brown bat is one of 46 species in North America. How does the number of different bats compare with the numbers of other kinds of animals? In the Investigate, you will compare and sort different objects. Shoes. Vocabulary preview. Classification. The process of grouping similar things together. Page 272. Kingdom. A major large group of similar organisms. Page 273. Species. A single kind of organism that can reproduce among its own kind. Page 274.
This would be a good activity to do at home, a way that you can classify and just use some shoes out of your closet or your parents' closet to understand classification.
Investigate. Classify shoes. Guided inquiry. Start with questions. Scientists classify organisms by their characteristics. Some animals can be difficult to place into one group. What organisms can be classified with a platypus? How do scientists classify objects that are very similar to one another, like birds? Investigate to find out. Then read to learn more. Prepare to investigate. Inquiry skill tip. Objects can be classified in many ways, based on their characteristics. You can classify objects based on how they are used, the materials from which they are made, or how they react in certain situations. Materials. Newspaper. Shoes. Make an observation chart. Shoe characteristics. Follow this procedure. 1. Work on the floor or cover a table with newspaper. Take off one of your shoes. Put it in a pile with your classmates' shoes. 2. Make a list of all the characteristics of the shoes that you can. An example is whether a shoe has laces. 3. Think of a way to divide the shoes into 2 groups, based on a characteristic you can observe. For example, you might make one group of shoes with laces and another group of shoes without laces. 4. Use another characteristic to divide both groups into even smaller groups. 5. Continue to classify the shoes based on their characteristics until each shoe is in a division of its own. Draw conclusions. 1. What characteristics did you use to make your groups? 2. Standards link. How is this similar to the ways in which scientists classify living things? 3. Inquiry skill. Scientists classify organisms to find similarities and differences. Why must you compare and contrast things when you classify them? Independent inquiry. Gather 10 or more small objects from home or from your classroom. Then develop a way to classify them. Understand science. Vocabulary. Classification. Page 272. Kingdom. Page 273. Species. Page 274. Science concepts. How scientists classify living things. What the major groups of living things are. Focus skill. Main idea and details. Look for characteristics that separate groups of living things. Classification. When you walk into your kitchen at home, you probably know where to find most things. The forks are in a drawer with the spoons and knives. Milk and meat are in the refrigerator. Canned soups and vegetables are on a pantry shelf or in a cupboard. Pots, pans, and dishes have their places too. Putting similar items together in a kitchen makes cooking and cleaning up easier. The process of classification or grouping similar things together makes sense in a kitchen. It also makes sense for scientists who study living things. No one can know everything about the 10 million or more different kinds of organisms that may live on Earth. By identifying characteristics that living things share, scientists can group similar organisms together. To do this, scientists look for similarities in the way organisms look, live, eat, move, grow, change, and reproduce. Focus skill. Main idea and details. What is classification? How is it useful to scientists? What characteristics do these two animals share? Do you think scientists classify the alligator and the armadillo the same way? Why or why not? Grouping living things. Scientists classify for many reasons. Classifying living organisms makes finding and sharing information easier. When scientists discover an organism that's new to them, they can learn some things about it by learning about similar organisms that have already been classified and studied. Scientists classify living organisms into major large groups called kingdoms. All members of each kingdom have certain characteristics. Different methods of classification have different numbers of kingdoms, either 5 or 6. Scientists classify animals together because animals are made of many cells and because they feed on other living or once living things. Plants also have many cells, but they make their own food. Most fungi also are many-celled organisms. However, they don't make or eat food. They absorb it, usually from the remains of other organisms. Protists are mostly one-cell organisms. Some make food as plants do. Others take in food as animals and fungi do. Bacteria are all one-celled. Their cells have no nucleus. Most feed the way fungi do, but some make their own food. Some scientists group all bacteria in one kingdom. Others separate them into 2 kingdoms. Focus skill. Main idea and details. What is a kingdom? How do the kingdoms of living organisms differ? The 5 kingdoms. One classification system divides all organisms into 5 kingdoms: animals, plants, fungi, protists, and bacteria. What characteristics does each kingdom have? Animals, plants, protists, bacteria, fungi. Smaller groups. Kingdoms are convenient groups, but they are very large. Each kingdom includes many different kinds of organisms. Just as you did with shoes in the Investigate, scientists classify organisms into smaller and smaller groups. The members of each group share more and more characteristics. The smallest group contains only one kind of organism. The first step is to divide each kingdom into smaller groups. A phylum is a major group within a kingdom. Organisms in a phylum have more characteristics in common than do organisms in different phyla. Phyla are divided into classes. Classes are divided into orders, and orders are divided into families. Just as in your family, members of the same family share many characteristics. Like human families, they have individual differences. A genus is a subdivision of a family. Finally, each genus can contain one or more species. A species is a unique kind of organism. Every different kind of living thing has its own scientific name. This name includes the names of the smallest two groups, genus and species. For example, the scientific name for the house cat is Felis domesticus. Felis is the name of its genus. The name of its species is domesticus. House cats, and only house cats, have this name. When scientists use this name, they know they're talking about a house cat, not some other kind of cat. To divide large groups into smaller groups, scientists look for characteristics that some members of one group have but others don't. In the example shown here, the butterfly is the only animal in the top group that doesn't have a backbone. Therefore, the butterfly doesn't belong to the same phylum as the other animals. At the next level, all the animals except the fish are mammals, so the fish doesn't belong to the same class as the others. As the groups get smaller, each group includes organisms that are more alike and more closely related. For example, the genus Felis includes both the house cat and the ocelot. They are more closely related to each other than they are to the tiger, but they are both closer relatives of tigers than they are of bears, whales, fish, or butterflies. Focus skill. Main idea and details. What is one detail about the species level of classification? Instalab. Classify buttons. Pile a dozen or more buttons of different sizes, shapes, and colors on the table. Call this a kingdom of buttons. Based on the button's characteristics, find ways to divide them into smaller groups until each button is its own species. What scientific name will one particular button have? Organisms are classified into smaller and smaller groups, from kingdom to species. A classification system identifies related groups. The house cat, Felis domesticus, and the ocelot, Felis pardalis, share a genus, so they are very close relatives. GPS wrap-up and lesson review. Essential question. How are living things grouped? In this lesson, you learned how scientists classify organisms. All living things can be classified into one of 5 kingdoms. Georgia on location. Atlanta. The Georgia Aquarium. Imagine walking through an undersea world filled with 8 million gallons of water and more than 100,000 animals. Around every corner are new habitats and species to explore. That's what you'll experience at the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta. Built in 2005, the Georgia Aquarium is currently the largest aquarium in the world. Just as important, the aquarium staff is dedicated to protecting animals. Its program, known as the 4 R's, includes rehabilitation, relocation, rescue, and research. This program strives to improve the health of aquatic animals, both vertebrate and invertebrate. Exploring Georgia's coasts. A good place to start at the Georgia Aquarium is the Georgia Explorer Gallery. This area features a unique display of animals that live in Georgia's coastal waters. The touch tanks enable visitors to learn about horseshoe crabs, shrimp, stingrays, and other local animals in a hands-on way. You can even meet a sea turtle. Dive into a coral reef. One of the most fascinating experiences at the Georgia Aquarium is walking through the coral reef displays. Here you will find hundreds of species of invertebrates, such as jellyfish, crabs, and reef squid. You'll also see plenty of vertebrates, including clownfish, seahorses, and sharks. These animals vary greatly in their size, structure, and behavior. However, they all depend on the coral habitat for survival. A mission to protect. The Georgia Aquarium is also involved in protecting aquatic animals around the world. Aquarium workers rescued 2 beluga whales that were being kept under a roller coaster at an amusement park. The whales now live in a larger, healthier environment. The aquarium staff also tries to educate people about ways they can help protect these animals. Many of the exhibits show how people can help protect the world's fisheries and save endangered animals such as the right whale. Think and write. 1. What are the 2 different types of animals that can be found at the aquarium? Give an example of each type. 2. Bacteria live in the tanks of the aquarium. How do you think these organisms compare to larger, multi-celled animals?